Hello, friends. Welcome back to Non-Toxic Environments. This is your host, Andy Pace. Today we have Corinne Segura, founder of My Chemical Free House, here to talk about healthy flooring materials and other healthy building products. Healthy flooring has really become one of the most asked about topics with my clients. And Corinne has written several articles on this subject and will share her findings with us and educate us on how she does her own personal research. Now, Corinne is a building biologist practitioner and founder of My Chemical Free House, where she tests and writes about green building materials. She's also a guest contributor at Green Building Advisor and a course creator for the Building Biology Institute. She has over 8 years of experience as a Green Materials Specifier for new builds and renovations, often working with highly chemically sensitive clients. Here's Corinne.
So I had quite extreme chemical sensitivities, and I had to, well, I didn't have to, but I really wasn't able to find suitable housing. And so it seemed like the best option was to build a tiny house. So I was investigating all the materials for myself. There wasn't a lot of information out there, which is why I started the blog, My Chemical Free House, because it just, there was Paula Baker Laporte's book, which is still really a helpful resource, but there wasn't a lot online. And so I was building and testing, and then I was writing at the same time. And it just started as like that small little project. And over time, the tiny house wasn't really built right for mold because I only knew about testing materials. I didn't know about that you also had to learn about building science and so many other construction details. But that didn't work out in terms of mold, but I did continue to get better in terms of my MCS, chemical sensitivities. It took many years. I mostly got better from avoiding mold and different kind of just going through that process and healing from mold. And then I did the Gupta program right sort of at the end, and that just kind of got rid of those last little kind of loops that my brain was like stuck on a few little things. I was still extremely sensitive, like 6 months ago or so, to like a few things. And in general, I would say I was mild, but then there were, so those have gone away completely since doing
Wow,
that.
that's fantastic. So obviously this wasn't your, 20 years ago, you didn't think that when you grew up, you're going to be doing this for a living, did you?
No, I have a degree in anthropology and international development, but you know what? It was funny because there's always these little like hints in life. I was always wanting to do this BCIT course. If you're from Canada, you might know BCIT, and it was about green roofs and like sustainable buildings. And I was like, I really want to do that, but it doesn't really seem like what I should be. I was kind of pushed towards like, a bachelor in arts kind of area.
Mhm. That's interesting. It's fairly often where I get a client that says, I've been working on this for so long. I've been doing these things in my own home and learning about this stuff that they then say, I should write a book, or I should do a blog or help other people. But it never really happens because, life gets in the way and we have other interests and so forth. But, this is what you did. And I applaud you. Everybody does, for what you're doing, because you've learned so much from your own personal journey. And the best thing you can do is help others who are along that same path.
Well, I find this really interesting. Like when I fully recover from my fatigue, I'd like to like physically build houses. Like I love doing this.
That's fantastic. So, um, how do you choose a subject for your next blog? Is it because of just something that you've been thinking about, it's on your list, you got to get to, or do you have folks coming to you saying, I wish you would talk about this?
There's definitely hints in my comments about things that I haven't covered, sometimes things I hadn't thought about to cover. So I definitely listen to what people are saying. I read all the comments. I'm responding to all the comments right now. Um, Things that came up in consulting sometimes, I do look at like what people, there are programs to look at what people are actually searching for. So I can see like 1,000 people are searching for this. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's in line with what I do. So let me write about that.
I like that. I like that approach, and kind of taking that proactive approach. Like this is the information they need. So let's start researching that. How long does that take? If you decided that you wanted to talk about gutter guard systems, I mean, how long would it take for you to put together that information?
There are articles where I already know the information. I'm like, man, I should have just written this down. So as other articles that I write in an hour because I know all the information. And then there are articles that have extensive research. I like doing a lot of testing. I did a test on how to get rid of plug-in odor. I won't say the brand, but you know the brand, plug-in odor on drywall. And yeah, that was really successful. I'm working on one for essential oils, which is turning out to be trickier, but I'm still working on it. So I
Okay.
really like in-depth like testing. I get samples of especially flooring. I get flooring samples, like multiple samples a month usually.
Wow. That's got to be a never-ending process, really, because even as a material supplier and a healthy home consultant myself, I mean, I just get inundated with requests from manufacturers and suppliers, and there just isn't enough time in the day to go through it all. And then you also couple with that the fact that manufacturers change formulations, change their offerings, and so you have to always give that caveat. This is based upon the latest information that we have. If something has changed beyond our control, obviously opinions may change.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes in flooring. Sometimes it's just like the marketing, and then you just need to see the product and be like, oh, it's the same product. And sometimes there's, like a real change in the industry. Like right now, we're seeing like everything going towards waterproof.
Mhm.
And then there's just always constant formula changes. So I like to really see the product, almost all like not all the products on my blog, but I've seen like most of the paints. I've seen most of the sealers. Like yeah, I like to like try the product out.
And that's tough. What I mean by that is, as somebody who suffers from chemical sensitivity yourself, um, so much of your own personal experiences obviously go into the overall report or the blog that you post, but then you have to also expand that to others who may not be as sensitive as you are or might have a sensitivity in a different direction. So I don't know if you remember a fellow named John Bauer.
Yeah.
And years ago, he wrote a book on building healthy homes. And I mean, he's a photographer now because he got, and I'll be honest, he got sued so many times from people who they said his home didn't work for them. Well, and honestly, there is no perfect product, there's no perfect project. So you got to be very careful with how you recommend. I know this, you know this. But how do you juggle that? There's got to be situations people come to you and say, "Well, you said this would be the best." Um, well, I said in general, right?
Yeah, well, I think being part of the MCS community, like not just my own reactions, but being part of like the online communities and seeing, oh, this person like, thinks this is really a harsh product for them where I thought it was okay. And then you see the whole range. And then I'm not working one-on-one with people right now, but I used to work one-on-one with people. And then just over time, you start to learn this range. And so I try to give people like the most probable outcome if I was talking to them one-on-one or even in the comments or something. But so yeah, I might say most people don't react to like the smell of wood, but some people are so sensitive that even the wood itself. So that's a way that you can kind of explain it. And you do have to trust yourself. You do have to get your own samples. You do have to make sure the samples are new as possible. And yeah, you have to trust your own best like trials there.
Well, I mean, ultimately, that's how you started to get that information in the first place, is what you could and could not tolerate. And then it's just a matter of saying, but here's a caveat, your sensitivities might be different. So please test for your own personal tolerances.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, that's really has been one of the problems, is that people want answers like what does work, what doesn't work, and they want a black or white answer, but it's a world of gray, and so we have to provide that wiggle room.
Yeah, there are very few. I'll sometimes say like the only sure bet is glass. Glass is probably the only thing that nobody reacts to. I've seen people react to metal. I've seen people react to tiles because there's a very slight mineral smell. It's not toxic,
Yeah.
but anything that has a smell is a potential for a reaction that may even not, may not be toxic. But yeah, so everything, almost everything has a possible reaction.
Wow. That is very interesting. So let's get into a bit some of the materials because I know that people have asked a lot of questions about this and always want to know, what are your most popular questions about flooring that you are seeing today?
The questions about flooring is like how to make that choice individual. Like there's all this information. There are so many flooring choices. There are so many good flooring choices too. Like there's the list of like good for most chemically sensitive people is pretty long, even in types and then bringing in different brands. So like what people really want is like how do I choose? And the first point, which you've always talked about with your degree of green, is like, what's what are your priorities? Like, not just what are you reactive to, but what are some things that maybe you're not reactive to, but they're high priority for you, high priority chemicals to avoid. Maybe it's a red list chemical list because you've had cancer and you want to avoid like the Prop 65 chemicals. So that's, and some people, you like my blog doesn't usually talk about the environmental impact. I do know about it because just when you read so much about fluorine, you
Sure.
get the idea, even if I wasn't specifically looking for that. So for some people, environment is important. Most of our people, both of our
Mhm.
peoples, are probably more looking for like what's healthy for the indoor air quality.
Yeah, definitely. And so, right now, the big push has been, a white oak floor. They want that modern farmhouse look. I just had a call right before we talked today. Building a mountain home, it's got to meet the aesthetic. Of course, has to meet a price point. But then you throw into the mix, well, okay, we can find a material, we can find finishes that we know will be safe, but what if it has to be installed using things like adhesives? If it's a slab on grade construction, it has to be a full spread glue down. So it's looking at the big picture, right? It's not just the material itself, but how do we install it? How do we maintain it? And then from a health aspect down the road, what happens when we have to replace that? What's the health impact of replacing that floor? So it's a little bit bigger than just the floor choice itself.
Yeah, there's things you need to know from the beginning, which is why it is helpful to talk to someone one-on-one to help guide you through this. Because like you're saying, so there's certain plank of wood floors where if it's a certain, even if it's not on concrete, if it's a certain width, then you need a adhesive, then it's like a glue assist.
Yeah.
So you might not know that. You might be like, wide plank is so popular. I really like the wide plank. And then you didn't even know that that's going to change your install. And then same with things like, the oil-based finishes need a totally different type of maintenance.
Different type of maintenance, different type of the down the road if you have to refinish it, it's a different chemical set to do that. A lot of decisions have to be made. So I remember 30 years ago when I first got into this business, more than 30 years ago now. I mean, I had the only manufacturer I had to choose from for flooring at the time was the Forbo Marmoleum product. Good old fashioned natural linoleum. Made from pine resin, wood flour, mineral pigments, spread onto a jute backing. Linseed oil, of course, which gives it an antibacterial, antistatic. Uh, have you seen that becoming more popular again, or is that still kind of on the fringes of what people are looking for?
It's not something that people bring up very often, over even quite a few years of working with people. I do think it's a good product. I think it's definitely the replacement for vinyl sheet. Like if that's what you were thinking of for your kitchen. It also has a really cool modern look. Like I really like how Like I would use this in a tiny house that was really modern because some of it looks like concrete, like a little bit like concrete.
Yeah.
And so you can get that really like nice uniform look that you can't really get from, I mean, other than concrete itself and maybe tile, but tile has the lines. So it's kind of a cool look. And I think, yeah, I have an article just on natural linoleum, even though it's not super popular, but I like to also, yeah, tell people about like what I think is a cool product.
It's just it's one of those things where you kind of it's like cork flooring. You either love it or you don't really like it at all, right? It's very polarizing.
Yeah.
But Forbo has done a good job over the last few years, really broadening the scope of their aesthetic. I mean, they even now have some textures that make it look like a slate floor, more linear patterns to give it kind of that modern wood look. So they are improving that, but then it's a matter of finding contractors who know what they're doing, putting it in properly, and then remembering too that it has to, the glue down sheet has to be glued down. So it's like taking a step backwards to take two steps forwards.
Yeah, I would definitely make sure you have an installer that's done it before for the at least for the sheet. Like they have a click together, that's obviously quite easy.
Mhm.
And anyone that's installed a click, I believe anyone that's all has installed a click together floor should be able to figure that one out. But yeah, the sheet's a bit different, especially if you're like welding the seam. So you might, yeah, when you're there's different things you need to look at the same time. Like not only the maintenance and the glues, but like, do I have an installer in this area? If I want to do like a linseed oil finish on my wood floors, like, has anyone done that before? I wouldn't go with someone that hasn't done something before because I've tried that and it's not always the best results. It could be fine, but yeah.
That brings up a good point. No matter what you and I would recommend for somebody on a project, if there's not good support from the contractors or even the manufacturers themselves,
Yeah.
close enough where if you're having a problem, you can reach out and grab somebody to help. Quite often, customers will want insulated concrete form for building materials, or they want some, exotic geothermal cell system for HVAC. But if there's not somebody locally who can actually troubleshoot when necessary, and you will need that at some point, it's kind of a moot point to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there are some products that are so close. Like if you're talking about the AFM polyurethane, the
Mhm.
poly it's like that is very close to other water-based finishes. Like they can call J or U,
Mhm.
figure that out. But if it's marmoleum sheet and welded seams and they've never done that before, that's like a different topic.
It is. And you can't just have somebody who says, "Oh, I've done vinyl before, so I can do this." Even though it's somewhat similar, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And those little details that make it a little bit different is what actually can ruin the project. So I totally agree with you. So I remember years ago, the some of the first healthy homes built here, at least in Wisconsin, in my area, the homes were built with ceramic tile floors throughout the entire house because at the time that was really the recommendation. Like you got to do something that's completely inert. But then we started learning about how um, it's hard, it's cold, it's sometimes difficult to maintain depending on the type of thin set that was used and grout and so forth. Well, then that's the next thing, the grout. The grout can develop mold, and so I guess my point here to this little question preamble is there is no perfect product or perfect project. Everything there's a downside and an upside. And so when it comes to doing a whole house of tile, are you looking at or have you looked into things like large format porcelain to minimize the grout lines? I mean, what's your approach there?
You know, I don't know how many people have said like I don't want concrete or tile. Like people really don't want concrete or tile, except if polished concrete is like definitely the look you're going for, or you're in the most extremely sensitive. I would also really think about the resale value because tile is perfectly normal in Florida, as your main floor, but it's not the more north you go, and you could get into the resale value of your house. There are some really large format tiles. I don't usually see mold growing like just in a regular room or even a bathroom. It's pretty uncommon. I think you can prevent that if it was installed right, and maybe a little bit of a grout sealer, like the breathable one, like the AFM grout sealer. that's not usually the problem that I see. It's usually people that just either because they have little kids that tend to fall over easily, or they
Mhm.
have older people who could be a risk of falling as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that we also have to remember that things that float in the air, especially in a bathroom, steam will carry soap scum and dead skin cells, and they have to land somewhere. And a grout material is just a nice, comfortable environment for mold spores to hang out and feed upon that mess we created. So it's a matter of keeping those things clean.
Well,
And
within the shower, it's a little different. Yeah.
yeah,
Like a lot of times if I see grout in a lot of mold in the grout in the shower, there can also be mold behind
yeah,
going on there too. It could be surface though. It could be surface, like you're saying.
yeah. But that's so, I mean, that kind of leads me to my next question, which is there's so much discussion now. I would say well over 50% of the clients I deal with on a daily basis are leading with, we've got a mold problem we're dealing with. How do we rebuild in a healthier manner? And so you mentioned this before when talking about some flooring, about the sort of the push in the flooring industry is to go with waterproof materials. Um, I understand what they mean, which is that means that water won't affect the floor itself, but that doesn't mean that water can't get underneath and affect
Mhm.
the subfloor and become not only a mold breeding ground, but also start to warp the subfloor. So if you're looking for flooring options in a home and people are really trying to avoid mold, and that's their main goal, what type of products would you point them to?
So I don't think that like spilling things on floors is any major source of mold. It could be if the way that things get trapped. But I'm usually the main thing that I'd want to look at first is if there's a vapor barrier that's that could be causing a point of condensation. Like I'll give you an example. My best friend's brother just bought a house on the coast of Alabama. It's up on stilts, so it's like wooden stilts. So there's a big space under before you start the first floor. And they had some kind of engineered wood, like engineered bamboo or something with a underlayment, and the underlayment had a plastic, which most do, not all. But if you get like a foam underlayment, there's usually like a plastic layer, and there was so much mold on the plywood. They ripped out the flooring. Plywood is the subfloor because it was a point of condensation, the hot air coming from the outside condensating because there was AC inside.
Mm,
So that's usually when you're going to get like major mold. Is not
hmm.
usually from spills, but also with spills, I would consider like the different layers and like it's ideal if things can't get trapped. Like if you're having a vinyl plank flooring, it's ideal if the underlayment is attached already and it's a good one, like it's a decent enough one that's attached, because then if you have another vinyl's already pretty waterproof. I mean, it is waterproof, it's up to the seam sometimes. And then another layer that blocks moisture. I wouldn't really want things getting trapped,
Yeah,
ideally.
and that's kind of a difficult situation sometimes too because of the way the home's designed. A lot of times, in the situation you're talking about, having heat and probably moisture that's coming up from the underside, it's a matter of having to probably do some better insulation from the underside so
Yeah.
we don't have that problem happening on that flooring material. And bamboo, I remember bringing in bamboo in the 90s, and one of the things they talked about how it was how durable it was and so forth. It molds very, very fast because
Mhm.
there's a lot of glue used to ply everything together. And so it's a huge, huge food source for mold. And so you got to be very careful in those more moist environments.
Yeah.
So a question has come up that I want to talk about. And folks, if anybody has any questions for Corinne about flooring materials, and then of course even about past um, blog posts. I mean, she's really written on just about everything that you can imagine inside of your home. And so here's your opportunity to ask some questions. So one of the questions that came to me is I've got a client who is right now living in an apartment building. Now, apartment buildings are tough because we normally have really no choice as to what's going on, but the apartment manager is willing to work with her. They have to redo the carpeting in the main hallways.
Uh-huh.
So I know we talk about carpeting a lot, but have you looked at any like commercial grade carpets? And what are your thoughts there?
I don't usually like specify or write about commercial. If it was in the home, I have some ideas. They probably want to go with a nylon, like almost certainly. So I would look at, I don't know if you can get samples. Sometimes commercial products are harder to get samples of, but if you could, there are lower VOC options. Like one is Floor, FLOR. That's not really, I don't think, I mean, I think it is technically commercially rated, but I don't know if they'd be willing to do that because it's a tile.
Yeah, we've actually done that in commercial apartment buildings and condo main areas. So that would work.
Okay. So that's a really good one for nylon. So nylon, is usually what they want to go with. It's more typical. It might be more durable than polyester, or at least people think it is. So that's a very low VOC option. They also now have a new backing. They used to only have PVC or bitumen, and now they have a non-PVC, which is probably a polypropylene. That's what it looks like and feels like and smells like to me.
Mhm.
So that's great. Yeah, they're fairly transparent about like what's in it, and it doesn't need to be glued down. So they don't glue it in commercial, do they?
They can, and that's one of the questions too. A lot of times they'll want to use like a pressure sensitive adhesive where they can actually peel it off if they need to replace a piece. We've done it both ways, but then again, you have to understand that you might have to take that one step backwards and take two steps forwards. You might have to use an adhesive that may not be so safe in order to get a carpeting material that is safe itself.
Yeah.
And so if we could use those floor dots, and it would be allowed, that would be the best way to go. But then you worry about if carts are running down the hallway, would those pieces come up and become a trip hazard? So that we got to be careful there.
Yeah, the sticky dots are really, really mild, like compared to, I mean, certainly compared to any glue. So yeah, I do think that's a good option, especially if it's in the hallway. The other thing I would look at there is like making sure that you're not creating negative pressure, at least during the first little while, depending on how sensitive you are, maybe a day, maybe a few weeks. So when you're running your bath fans and your kitchen fans, you're sucking air out, which is pulling air in. And sometimes the main route of like fresh air or new air coming in is under your main door. Sometimes the hallway has a positive pressure and there's air coming into the hallway, so it's bringing it under your door. So you can really kind of mitigate that, at least in the shorter term. You could maybe even like put some foam. I mean, you'd have to do it every time you open the door, but you could tape and put some foam if you're extremely sensitive. You could try and avoid the negative pressure or make sure you have a window open when you're running the bath fan at least. So at least there's like another clear like route for the air. So yeah, there's other things to look at there.
That's a great point. I think that's so often we deal with odors coming from a garage or a hallway, and just changing the pressure of a space makes such a huge difference. I've even seen this with radon in basements. If
Mhm.
you can just change the pressure, take a small fan and direct it down the stairs, that'll actually reduce the radon that's coming up through the concrete slab, sometimes by 50% or more. So there are very small things that we can do to make an improvement. It doesn't always have to involve thousands of dollars worth of materials and labor.
Yeah, and once you learn about like these air pressures and how things are coming into your house from other spaces, you'll like and how the HVAC system works and how you can control it, you'll just feel so much more empowered, especially if you're extremely sensitive and these kind of things like bring you a lot of anxiety. You'll feel empowered. You'll be like, well, all I need is some tape and a window open and not to run the fan at certain times. So
So I want to get off the subject of flooring a little bit, but I just had a question come in. I have a bathroom renovation coming up, and I'm wondering about what to use for my bathroom flooring. The shower walls will likely be Corian. So what are you
what
thinking about for flooring there?
what's the subfloor?
Yeah, that's
First question always.
yeah, that'd be the next question. What is the subfloor? What are we dealing with? Let's say the subfloor is just a plywood underlayment.
Yeah, they don't know probably plywood, so it's probably an upper layer. So it's either plywood or OSP. I it's it'd be really hard to convince me not to do tile in a bathroom, to be
right?
honest. If it was on a slab, then you could do polished concrete. You definitely could do marmoleum. So in my post on bathroom flooring, I go into like the details, and I'll just say a few of the main ones. I would heat weld the seams. I would run it up the wall a little bit. Or use the cove. And I think Forbo, at least they used to have a non-vinyl cove. I haven't checked in a while. So this is kind of like your baseboards, except it's
Hmm.
plastic.
Yep.
And yeah, I would be very cautious with like the seam up the tub, like it would be waterproofed, ideally behind the marmoleum, with the if you have an underlayment happening, and then caulked weld and like kept an eye on weld there.
Yeah, I like the idea of doing marmoleum there, but I think that the biggest problem, I mean, to what you're saying is doing that cove base. Very few contractors know how to do that complete cove base up the
Mhm.
wall. That's a skill set that I think is long gone. It's like
Okay.
trying to find a carpet installer who knows how to hand sew the seams. It's just very difficult to find. But if you can do that, you can always just use like a Schluter trim piece, yeah, up on top to sort of finish it
Oh,
off,
okay.
which would look
Yeah.
good. But yeah, I would say you're right. Tile is gonna be the number one choice. Marmoleum was a good choice. I even have companies now that are recommending the use of like the luxury vinyl planks. I'm still not a huge fan of that. I
Well,
think there's too
they
much.
pull apart. Like they might pull apart.
Yeah.
I've had a bathroom in a rental that it wasn't actually luxury vinyl, it was the glue down, oh no, there was another one that had luxury vinyl plank. It was a hotel. And it was pulling apart. And so if it pulls apart at the seams or like around the edge, because there's usually a gap, well, there always is a gap around the edge, and then you can have like a shift in the board. So it's not like the product's bad. It's just if it's not perfect, then you could get water under it.
Yeah, I'm so fearful of water getting under flooring materials, mainly because I've had leaks in homes that I've owned over the years. And once you've had a leak, I mean, that feeling never goes away. I hear water drip from a half a mile away, and I just instantly go into shock. So I have to be careful with that, and I probably recommend things that are a little bit more over the top to make sure it's never a problem in the future.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And yeah, and then you just go back to like, why didn't I just do tile?
Right? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question that's completely unrelated to what we've been talking about. Have you done a blog post, or is this on the list to do about appliances? I get so many calls about appliances, wash machines, the chemical off-gassing of the gaskets, the painted finishes, about dishwashers and so forth. So what do you think about this?
So I have two articles. One is appliances for the chemically sensitive, and one is appliances without Prop 65. So these are very different issues, like we're kind of talked about very briefly in the beginning. Like if you just want to avoid the Prop 65 chemicals which can cause cancer or developmental problems, then you look for that. But if you're chemically sensitive, you're looking for sometimes very minor off-gassing of things that would never be like labeled as such. So in the article on appliances for chemically sensitive, it's very crowdsourced. Like that's what other people have reported. I obviously cannot go and like test the appliances the way I test flooring samples or caulking things I can buy. So, there's a couple things there that like maybe I've owned, but it's mostly like a crowdsourced article, and it's updated often actually, because yeah, that is something that people do tend to report. And if you want to report something, like just leave it in the comments and it'll help someone else.
That's fantastic because again, I get the calls usually about things like wash machines and dryers.
Yeah.
Uh, and I at this point I say, avoid the front loaders because that's where, mold problems happen more often, and then get really good commercial grade, Speed Queen or something like that with a lot of stainless steel in it. But beyond that, it might come down to, as you say, anecdotal information from others who have gone through this already. What did they end up going with?
Yeah, well, Speed Queen is the top choice for sure. There's Gear Dry versus Drum Dry, I believe it's called. I'm I might be saying that wrong, but check the article. And then there's scents that are used in especially dryers, but sometimes they're adding like a sample of something to a washing machine. So I also list out, as far as I know, like which brands are doing that and not doing that. There's also one brand, I've forgotten which brand it is, that adds, it's in the article, that adds a fragrance purposely to the seals. So they admit it. I mean, everyone could already tell, but like they did admit it. Um, and so yeah, those are some things you need to look for.
It's interesting. I'm looking around my desk here because I just got mailed to me a gasket. So, folks,
Really?
here's what Corinne and I deal with on a regular basis. People send us stuff. And so, they'll send us is this going to be a problem? This is for a very good client of mine that's building a new home right now. And we're choosing cabinetry for the house. And there's a rubber gasket in the cabinetry.
Yeah.
And that rubber gasket is probably an EPDM rubber, and
Mhm.
it has a fairly strong rubber smell. So I'm scouring the planet to try to find a gasket that's made from 100% silicone, because typically
Mhm.
silicone is less likely to emit. However, I get a sample and it smells just as much as the other one. Uh, it just drives me nuts. But I have to I'm going to send the sample along and say, what do you think? Because your senses might be different.
Yeah. You're saying the silicone smelled bad?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say it smells bad. And here's the caveat. It smells, but it smells different.
Okay.
And so um then it comes down to which one is more acceptable.
And
Um,
faster to off gas because silicone is usually much faster to off gas
correct.
than other rubbers.
Correct. And that's exactly what I was thinking. We're on the same
Mhm.
page.
Yeah.
Perfect. Exactly what I was thinking with this, but that initial aroma was, oh boy, this is going to take a while to off gas.
Mhm.
And so, you know, again, these are the things we deal with on a regular basis.
Yeah, because that's for metal cabinets, right? So that's
Yep.
like you think it's going to be all perfectly metal and not have any off-gassing, and then you have to look at, and some of the metal cabinets I think have some wood components too. So you have to actually get down to everything. If you're going as far as metal cabinets to start with, then you probably need to go as far as what are the other little tiny gaskets and things.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're going through right now. So it's interesting. I love doing what I do. I'm sure you do as well. For me, I'm learning from my clients on a daily basis. I've been learning for 30 years. I'll learn hopefully for another maybe 20. So, but it's a constant process.
It's
And
a group effort. My chemical free house is a group effort, I would say. People always contribute through the comments. If I see something in a group, of course, I'll keep it totally anonymous. But if there's like a consensus in a group, sometimes I'll do a survey in the group, one of the Facebook groups, or on my Facebook page. I'll try and do some kind of survey because if there's just not enough information about something, we have to crowdsource it, and it is a group effort.
without a doubt, and that's the difficult part, right? Crowdsource that information without being influenced by the manufacturers, the marketers. Um, you know, any manufacturer, any good marketer can take a product, I don't care what it is, and I can give you selling points why asbestos is wonderful. I won't talk about how my mother-in-law died from mesothelioma
Mhm.
from asbestos, but this is the problem we all have. And so my little soapbox here, when people come to us and say, I've been doing my research for 6 months and here's what I've come up with. Well, the research that most people do is based upon Google searches. And what you're going to get for the first 500 posts will be either from the manufacturers, their marketing companies, or paid bloggers, not someone like you who does this independently, but people who are paid to write good things about these products. And now I'm seeing it with the influencers, the Instagram influencers. Most of them don't really know what they're talking about, but they're willing to accept a commission to promote a product. And so it gets very difficult for the average consumer to trust a source. And so that's exactly why I wanted to have you on, because you're a trusted source.
Yeah, I pay for all the samples. I mean, once in a while someone will send me a sample, but in general I pay for them. And yeah, the fluorine posts, I generally don't get, there are some affiliate links, but I generally don't get any commission on specific purposes. I'm also really careful to, actually not even careful, it's a lack of, I put things in the order that either just makes sense, maybe because one's better or randomly. I don't focus on just the affiliates. There are like here's a more concrete example. If you Google the best non-toxic sofas, there are many articles where you're only going to see maybe five that are all affiliates.
Mhm.
I have like, I don't know how many I have. I have like 10 or something.
Right.
Half of them are not affiliates.
Sure.
Half of them are. I mean, if they
Yeah.
have an affiliate program, I'm going to list it, but there's a lot of sofas in my post that are not. So many articles will not even list those, and they'll just list the five that have the affiliate programs. So for me, that's something I would never do. That's for me, like that goes against the standards of my blog. I do use affiliate links, but it's you just have to be mindful like of the ethics of it.
Well, and I encourage people to go to your site and if you get an affiliate link, that's fantastic. I mean, because you're doing this, um, you're not doing this as a marketing company for a manufacturer. You're doing this for you and for others to learn from what you've gathered over all these years. And so there's got to be a way to support that, and that
Yeah.
support is through those links, and that's fully understandable and acceptable. And I encourage that. I'm more concerned about these, again, I call it the Instagram influencers. I remember a couple of years ago, it became very popular for the Instagram influencers to promote a couple new brands of air purifiers and mattresses that nobody's ever heard of. But
Yeah.
all of a sudden now everybody's pumping these brands, and they weren't very good products, but they got great publicity.
Yeah, there are certain product categories where there are more like where almost every company has an affiliate program. So that's like a thing to know when you're looking at mattresses or air purifiers. I do have a lot of non-affiliate brands in my mattress post because it's very specific for the chemically sensitive, and there are some small companies in there. And then the other thing to keep in mind is like the more expensive the product, the bigger the commission. So you might see like someone promoting like a more expensive version of the same thing. And so that's another thing you can look out for.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right. So that's enough of my rant on Instagram influencers and people who you should trust. A question came in about tile in a beachfront condo. There is concrete under the tile. Could I put Cali vinyl floor or the formable marmoleum over the tile, or should I just leave it and clean it well? Kind of I mean, you could do either way, and it can be done safe either way. What are your thoughts on that, Corinne?
There's a couple things there. Tile over a concrete slab that the person probably didn't do themselves, right? So we don't know if there's already a vapor barrier under the tile. There usually is because it's a decoupling, uncoupling layer that helps prevent cracks from coming through, telegraphing through from the slab. So in that case, you already have a vapor barrier. It like doesn't really you could like marmoleum is a breathable floor, so that's actually really great. Like if there was already a vapor barrier and then you put marmoleum on top, but I don't think you could do the sheet over tiles without doing like a self-leveling cement, right?
Yeah, you would have to, yes, because everything would telegraph through.
Yeah.
And so you're right. You would have to put down a kind of a scratch coat of a very, very thin leveling compound, and then you could glue to that. Um, it might also be a situation where you'd have to look at how much height we have to work with, toe kicks
Yeah.
for cabinetry, door jams. It'd be better just to maybe just bust it out. I will say this too about tile over concrete. It's amazing how many contractors give me grief when I say they need to put like a Schluter Ditra underneath the tile when I go into concrete. And they'll say, oh, we've been doing this for decades. There's never a problem. Folks, if you have a concrete slab on grade and you put tile over it without an uncoupling membrane, it's not a question of if it's going to crack, it's a question of when it's going to crack. And so it is a huge improvement to the project to put the decoupling membrane underneath. And so to your point, if you don't know if you have one or not, you might be putting yourself into a situation that you're blocking that vapor transmission. And so it might just be in your best interest to bust it out and start from scratch.
It's usually a better idea to like do it properly. But
It's always a good idea. Exactly, exactly right. Um, do you have a lot of clients that reach out about EMF issues?
yeah, it's not something I cover. I don't have the expertise for it. I have worked with an engineer who tried to teach me, and it's quite complicated. If you
Yes.
actually get into it, like you could talk about, oh, hey, this shields this. Like you could learn a little bit about it, but to actually fully be like an EMF consultant, I believe you should actually have like some really deep expertise. I do know about how like the thing I always need to know about is like how my material recommendation might affect your EMF sensitivity, or how my material recommendation is going to affect like mold potential. So even though I'm not experts in those specifically, I need to know how things go together. So if I was talking to someone about a trailer and it was all metal, then I'd have to just know that they were okay, like in a metal box.
Right.
But usually um, most materials don't really interact with EMFs in that way.
Right. It's interesting that, someone will come to us with a question about one product, and as you say, it goes on to the next and to the next, and you have to kind of look at it in layers. But with the degree of green program that I started many years ago, it's all about deciding up front exactly what we're dealing with. Are we dealing with a client who has a chemical sensitivity, a mold sensitivity? Is it somebody who suffers from chronic inflammatory response or mast cell activation? Are we looking to avoid all odors? Are we looking to avoid um, or just synthetic chemical fragrances? And there's so many things we can look at, and it seems like a daunting task for anybody to do this on their own, which is why it's so important for people to go to your website and go to your blogs and read about all the different materials and systems that you have investigated over the years, and then to work with somebody like yourself or me to now put that into action and make sure that the design build team understands exactly what we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, I wouldn't go through it without a consultant. I would say about the EMF issue, I've almost always seen it resolve when people resolve the mold issue. And so
Yeah.
that's another reason why I don't consider it like something of like the highest importance that I would have to really, really focus on. Of course, if you're having symptoms because of something, you need to like take care of yourself until you get better. But I do find mold underlies both chemical sensitivities and EMF sensitivities. And so focusing on that first and making sure maybe you can't even move into, like there are people who can't even move into their house for the first 6 months. And that, but if you've built a really mold safe house that's going to actually last you a really long time, you can make it through that stage. And maybe there's some ways to mitigate and create a temporary shelter or do something so that you have a long-term solution.
The little bit of what you said in there about how if somebody has a mold sensitivity, that usually means they'll also have a chemical sensitivity,
Mhm.
EMF sensitivity. 25 years ago, I remember there was discussion about adding MCS to the American Medical Association's list of documented diseases and teaching about it in medical school. It never got added. And I think what has occurred in these last 25 years is that we've learned so much more about not only chemical sensitivity, but what causes it. And so it used to be thought that chemical sensitivity was the disease. Now we're finding that in most situations, if not all, and I'm not an MD, I only talk about this as if I know what I'm talking about, but um, what I hear and what I hear from my clients and from other professionals is that chemical sensitivity is just a symptom of another underlying issue, such as SIRS or mast cell activation or Lyme disease or dysautonomia or something like that. And so this is ever evolving.
Yeah, I've always seen it downstream of mold, based on how people get better. So if most people are getting better by resolving the mold, and of course they'll take some supplements for detox. Like it's not just like, oh, get on a mold, but they'll take some supplements, and they might even have to do one of these brain retraining programs because the brain is like the pathways in the brain are in a certain structure that has already taught it that this thing is a danger. And then the more you encounter it, and then when you encounter it, you get symptoms, it reinforces, oh yeah, see, that was a danger. And the symptoms are real, like you're really feeling sick, you're
Mhm.
really having your throat swell up or like partly closed, like you're really not feeling well. It's like a real symptom.
It's an adrenaline release. It's that fight or flight response.
Yeah, so then your brain sees that, yep, that was a danger, and now let's guard against it even more. And that's how people can become more and more sensitive to smaller and smaller amounts because the brain's just registered it as a thing that's in the environment. Register, now we need to react in the same way. So doing the mold and the detox, I think, is important, but then also like the what I've gone through with the rewiring is really helpful too.
It's a whole systems approach. It's not just that one thing. As you say, you can't just get rid of the mold and so forth, or you can't just say, we're going to build a healthy home with all healthy materials. But what if the HVAC wasn't, installed properly or balanced properly? It's a whole systems approach. There is no one method that you can use to say, all right, we're going to focus on that. And so a lot of it has to do with the individual client and exactly what they're experiencing, what their sensitivities are. So many of my clients nowadays are not actually sensitive like you are and others have been over the years, but it's more or less they don't ever want to become sensitive. So let's design and build a home that eliminates most of these problems. And again, it's a big system approach.
Well, that's a lot easier. It's a lot harder when you have personal sensitivities because they are quite particular in some cases, like how I had healed from almost everything except not essential oils. So like
Mm.
natural smells, the probably the objectively least toxic thing was my biggest trigger until the end. So it
Wow.
is quite particular. So those are different. You need different types of help for each one. Building just for health, I think it's quite easy now. There's lots of great products and you can work. I do think you should still work one-on-one with someone because otherwise the overwhelm is just, and then the not knowing how things come together. Like you may learn everything about the flooring because you really did read a lot about it, but how everything comes together, finding the right installer and everything we've talked about. And then maybe there is some, EMF way that something like comes together, but how it affects the whole system, yeah,
Well, and
is important.
understanding too that no project ever goes perfectly, and there's going to be issues along the way
Yeah.
that have to be dealt with. And you can do all the research in the world, but if something, maybe there's a supply chain issue, the product you chose a year ago is no longer being made. Now, what do you do? These issues do come up, and so we do spend an awful lot of time in the consulting realm focusing on those things, those game time decisions. All right, we got to decide on something today because if the order doesn't get in, it's going to delay the project. And so that's where it really helps working with a consultant. So, last few minutes here, Corinne. First of all, what's the best way to follow you and what you are doing?
Oh yeah, I would definitely follow my Facebook page. So it's not a group, but it's the My Chemical Free House page because there's so much like updated new like what's going on with the regulations on the forever chemicals, the PFAs, my, new products I think are good, products I am critiquing. There's lots of really interesting stuff on my Facebook page. And yeah, if you're not on Facebook, you can follow the YouTube channel or the Instagram. I'm not as active on Instagram, but yeah. And I think people know the blog is My Chemical Free House. So.
Excellent. Yeah, I encourage everybody to go to the blog, follow, go to the Facebook page, follow. Corinne, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. If you have any final thoughts or messages, the floor is yours.
You know what I thought you were going to ask me in the last comment was, so what is the best flooring? Like there's actually just one answer at the end.
Is
No,
there?
So no, I just would say, like, if you have a question for me, definitely leave a comment in the comment section. I'm really getting to them all right now.
Fabulous. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today, and we really look forward to what your next adventures will be with materials and systems, and I hope everybody reaches out because you are a wealth of information.
Thanks so much, Andy. It's
All right,
great.
Corinne, take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye,
bye.
everybody. Folks, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Corinne. I know I did, and I always learn a lot when I speak with her. I wanted to take a few moments here at the end of the show just to let everybody know, if you haven't heard or read in the Circle group or online, we lost a very, very dear member of our GDC family past week, Emily Sattler. She has been with us for over 10 years, and she started off as working in the shipping and receiving, just doing small packages part-time, and that was over 10 years ago. And she blossomed into being our general manager, in charge of all of our web sales, doing a lot of the customer service over the phone and online, and she was just an integral part of the company. And she passed away last week unexpectedly, and it's left a giant hole in the company, both professionally and personally. We miss her dearly. I'm not saying this to garner sympathy from anyone, but I just wanted to let you all know that she enjoyed working with everyone. She absolutely loved what she did in this space. She was committed to the healthy building realm. I think when she started, in her early 20s, she really obviously didn't know anything about this. And, just recently, she and I were having conversations about how she found her place. And you could tell, just based on her interactions with customers, the way she conducted herself within, the industry and with what she did. So we are deeply saddened by her loss, or by her passing, and she'll never be replaced. But just wanted to let you all know, and please keep her family in your prayers and thoughts.